The laughter at the table was deafening, the kind of forced amusement that masked discomfort. I sat there, my hands resting lightly on the white linen tablecloth, my pulse steady despite the humiliation seeping into my skin. The wine dripped from my hair, staining the delicate lace of my blouse, the deep red liquid pooling onto my lap like an accusation. "You're always so sensitive, Mia," David, my husband of 6 years, chuckled, swirling the remainder of his drink in his glass. It was just a joke. The others at the table exchanged uncertain glances, some shifting in their seats, others looking away as if pretending they hadn't just witnessed what had happened. I wasn't sure what had stunned me more, the feel of the cold wine splashing across my face, or the smug smirk playing at the corner of David's lips. I should have been used to this by now. The small jabs that never seemed like much in isolation. The way he twisted my words made me feel like I was overreacting. The way he dismissed my opinions in conversations, turning my thoughts into punchlines. This was different. I reached for my napkin, dabbing my face slowly, methodically, refusing to let my expression crack. The laughter was still lingering in the air, but beneath it I heard something else. Silence. A thick, unspoken discomfort pressing in around us. David expected me to react, to snap, to cry. To storm out in anger so he could shake his head and sigh, telling everyone how I always overdramatized things. But I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Instead, I met his gaze and smiled. "I need to freshen up," I said smoothly, my voice perfectly controlled. I pushed my chair back, feeling the fabric of my dress stick to my skin, and stood. David opened his mouth, maybe to brush off the incident, maybe to say something that would turn the attention back on him. Yeah, but I was already walking away. In the bathroom, I stood in front of the mirror, watching droplets of wine trickle down my collarbone like war paint. This was the moment. The exact second my mind clicked into place. I wasn't angry. Not yet. What I felt was something else. Cold, calculating clarity. When I returned to the table, David was in the middle of another anecdote, his arms animated as if nothing had happened. I slid back into my seat and picked up my glass, taking a slow sip of water as if I were completely unbothered. His smirk faltered for just a fraction of a second. He was expecting fireworks. Instead, I had given him a loaded gun and refused to pull the trigger. I glanced around the table. The women in the group avoided eye contact. The men shifted uncomfortably. No one wanted to be involved. No one wanted to be the person to say, "That wasn't okay." And that was fine. I didn't need their sympathy, because for the first time in years I wasn't looking for validation. I was making a plan. That night, a different kind of silence. The car ride home was eerily quiet. David tapped the steering wheel, humming under his breath, glancing at me from the corner of his eye, as if waiting for me to break the silence. "You're not going to give me the cold shoulder all night, are you?" he finally asked, the edge of amusement in his voice forced. I smiled, looking out the window. "Of course not." He let out a small breath as if relieved. "Good. I mean, come on, Maya. You know how these things go. It was just a little fun." "Of course," I murmured. A pause. "Then you're not seriously mad, are you?" I turned my head and studied him, his jaw tight, his fingers gripping the wheel just a little too hard. "Why would I be mad?" I said lightly. "It was just a joke, right?" He exhaled in satisfaction, thinking he had won. That I was slipping back into the role I had played for years. The wife who swallowed her pride, smoothed over his sharp edges, and made sure no one saw the cracks beneath the surface. But what he didn't know was that I had already started packing. 1:47 a.m., the list. Long after David had gone to bed, I sat at the dining table, my laptop open, a pen tapping against my notebook. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't even angry. I was documenting. Every insult. Every time he made me feel small. Every moment he had crossed a line and convinced me that I was the one who had to apologize. A list of patterns, of manipulation, of cruelty masked as charm. He thought he was untouchable. But the thing about people like David was that they never thought about the consequences until it was too late. And I was about to teach him exactly what that felt like. The first move, at 2:13 a.m., I pulled up my bank account. David handled our finances. Not because I wasn't capable, but because he liked control. He thought I wasn't paying attention. He thought I wouldn't notice the extra accounts, the hidden spending, the reckless gambling on image and reputation. But I had noticed. I had just been waiting for the right time. With careful precision, I transferred half of our shared savings into an account he didn't have access to. Not a dollar more, not a dollar less, just what legally belonged to me. Then I opened a new email draft, addressing it to a lawyer I had been researching for weeks. Subject: consultation inquiry, divorce proceedings. I didn't hit send. Not yet. Because the best revenge wasn't served in anger. It was served with patience, with precision. And tomorrow, when David woke up thinking everything had returned to normal, he would have no idea just how much his world was about to change. Morning after. The illusion of normalcy. The morning light crept through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the bedroom. David stretched beside me, yawning, as if last night had never happened. I watched him from the corner of my eye, my body still, my breathing measured. He rolled onto his side, resting a hand on my hip, pressing a light kiss to my shoulder. "Morning, babe," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. I forced a smile. "Morning. You're not still upset about last night, right?" He chuckled as he sat up, running a hand through his tousled hair. "It was just a little fun. My friends love you, you know that." I nodded, my expression perfectly neutral. "Of course," he exhaled, satisfied. David thrived on control, not the obvious kind, but the kind that worked in slow, deliberate ways. He knew exactly how to apologize just enough to keep me from leaving, but never enough to admit fault. Not this time. I got up, walking to the bathroom without another word. Behind me, David sighed and got out of bed, heading toward the kitchen for his usual routine. I turned on the sink, letting the water run, staring at my reflection in the mirror. Today was the day. Step 1. Sealing the cracks. After David left for work, I sat at the dining table, sipping my coffee, my laptop open in front of me. I wasn't rushing. This had to be done right. First, I logged into my bank accounts. The money I had transferred last night was secure, tucked away where David couldn't touch it. I had left just enough in the joint account to keep him from getting suspicious. Then, I called my lawyer. "Miss Carter?" The voice on the other end greeted me. "Yes, I'm ready to proceed." The lawyer didn't sound surprised. I had contacted her weeks ago, laying the groundwork. "All right," she said, her tone businesslike. "We'll start with the financial review. Given what you've told me, we'll ensure everything is properly documented. Have you secured a place to stay?" I glanced at the set of keys resting on the table beside me, the ones to the apartment I had leased 2 months ago under my maiden name. "Yes." "Good," she said. "Now, about the next steps." A knock at the door interrupted her. I froze. David wasn't supposed to be home. "Miss Carter?" the lawyer prompted. "Sorry," I whispered. "I'll call you back." I set the phone down and moved cautiously toward the door. My heart pounded as I peered through the peephole. It wasn't David, it was someone worse. Step 2. The unexpected variable. I opened the door just enough to see her. Nicole. David's sister. She stood there in her crisp blazer and too bright smile, the same smile she always wore when she was about to deliver bad news wrapped in sugar-coated words. "Mia," she said sweetly, stepping forward as if I had already invited her in. I didn't move. "Nicole, what are you doing here?" She let out a sigh, tilting her head like she was about to break some devastating truth to me. "I wanted to talk about David." Of course, she did. Nicole had always been David's biggest defender. She was the kind of person who thought her brother could do no wrong, the one who blamed me every time we had an argument. "I heard about last night," she continued, her voice gentle. "I just wanted to check in on you, see if you're okay." I clenched my jaw. She wasn't here to check on me. She was here to make sure I didn't ruin David's reputation. "I'm fine," I said flatly. She hesitated. "Listen, I know my brother can be difficult sometimes." I raised an eyebrow. "Difficult?" She gave a small, practiced laugh. "Oh, come on, Mia. He has his moments, but we all do, right? You two have been together for years. I'd hate to see you throw everything away over one mistake." There it was, the same argument I had been fed over and over again. I had sacrificed so much for this marriage. My time, my energy, my happiness. And yet, whenever David crossed the line, I was the one expected to hold everything together. I forced a polite smile. "You don't have to worry, Nicole. I have everything under control." She studied me, her expression unreadable. "Are you sure?" Positive. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. Okay, just don't do anything rash, all right? I didn't respond. As soon as she left, I locked the door and exhaled slowly. I had planned for David's reaction. I had planned for his anger, his manipulation, his attempts to make me second-guess myself. But I hadn't planned for Nicole. She wasn't just a protective sister. She was smart, and if she sensed something was wrong, she would tell David. I needed to move faster. Step 3. Cutting the cord. That afternoon I packed the last of my essentials. Clothes, personal documents, my camera. The new apartment was ready. The divorce papers would be filed in the morning. All that was left was the final confrontation. David would expect me to wait, to cry, to plead for an apology that would never come. Instead, I would leave first. As I zipped up my suitcase, my phone buzzed. David? David, hey babe, dinner tonight? Just us. My stomach twisted. Even now, he was pretending nothing was wrong. I stared at the message, then slowly typed back. Me, sure, let's talk. The final night. David greeted me with a smile when I arrived home, a bottle of wine already open on the table. You know, he said, pulling out my chair. I was thinking, we've been tense lately. Maybe we should take a vacation, just us, no distractions. I bit the inside of my cheek, the irony. A week ago I would have fallen for this. I would have believed this was his way of making things better. But now I knew it was nothing more than a distraction. A way to pull me back under his control before I could break free. I sat down across from him, folding my hands neatly on the table. David, I said softly, I'm leaving. His fork clattered against his plate. What? I've already filed the paperwork. I'm moving out tonight. His face twisted, shifting from confusion to disbelief. You're joking. I'm not. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. Mia, be serious. I pulled out the documents from my bag and placed them between us. I am serious, David. His jaw clenched. You're making a mistake. No, I said, standing up. Staying would be the mistake. He stood too, towering over me. You think you can just walk away? I met his gaze, unwavering. I already have. For the first time, he looked shaken. I turned, grabbing my bag, and as I walked out the door for the last time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. David had spent years making me feel like I was nothing without him. But tonight, he was the one left standing alone. The night was quiet, too quiet. I sat in my new apartment, staring at my phone as the screen lit up again and again. David, we need to talk. You're being ridiculous. You can't just walk away from everything we built. Call me back. Now. I exhaled, setting the phone face down on the table. I had expected this. David wasn't the type to accept defeat easily. He thrived on control, on making sure I felt just uncertain enough to stay. But he didn't realize that he had already lost. I took a slow sip of tea, the warmth soothing against my palms. This wasn't just about leaving him. It was about making sure he never had the chance to hurt me again. And tonight, the trap I had carefully set was about to spring. The first crack by morning, David's texts had turned from demands to bargaining. Come on, Mia. Let's be adults about this. You don't have to do this. We can work it out. Just come home, and we'll talk. No pressure. No pressure. Right. I scrolled back to the messages from last night, the ones where he demanded, insulted, threatened. He was losing control, and he knew it. I let him stew in his desperation a little longer before finally replying. Meet me at the old apartment tonight, 7 p.m. I could practically feel his relief through the screen. David, I knew you'd come around. I'll see you then. I set my phone down, staring at the empty living room around me. This wasn't me coming around. This was me finishing what I started. The meeting. The sun had just begun to set when I pulled into the driveway of the apartment we once shared. David was already there. His car was parked in the usual spot, and through the window I could see him pacing. I took a deep breath, gripping the wheel tightly. This is it. I stepped out, adjusting my coat, and walked up to the door. David opened it before I even knocked. Mia, he breathed, stepping aside to let me in. I'm glad you're here. I walked past him without a word, heading toward the living room. He closed the door, locking it behind him. I heard it, the way the deadbolt slid into place, the way he exhaled like he had just regained control. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze. What do you want, David? I asked, keeping my voice calm. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration flickering behind his forced smile. Can we just talk? Like rational people? I nodded. Sure, Talk. He hesitated, as if unsure whether to be relieved or suspicious. You didn't need to go this far, he started, moving closer. We have a good life together, Mia. A real life. You're not really going to throw that away over a stupid argument, are you? I tilted my head. A stupid argument? You know what I mean, he sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Look, I know I've made mistakes. I know I've been hard on you sometimes, but that doesn't mean we just give up. I let the silence stretch between us, watching as he shifted uncomfortably under my stare. Then finally, I said, I'm not giving up, David. I'm choosing myself. His expression darkened. You think you can just leave and be fine on your own? He asked, voice low. I smiled. I don't think, David. I know. The muscle in his jaw clenched. You're making a mistake. No, I said, pulling something from my pocket and tossing it onto the table between us. You did. His eyes flickered to the envelope. His breath caught. What is this? He asked, but I could already see the truth dawning on him. Divorce papers, I said simply. Signed, filed, finalized soon. His hands curled into fists at his sides. You really did it, he muttered, his voice almost in disbelief. I nodded. The room went eerily silent. David's expression twisted into something unreadable, and for a moment I wondered if he would lash out, but instead he laughed. A cold, bitter sound. You think you're so smart, he muttered, shaking his head. I raised an eyebrow. I know I am. He exhaled sharply, then took a step forward. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch, and for the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Doubt. He had always thrived on my fear, on my hesitation, but now there was none. And that terrified him. The final blow. David sucked in a breath, shaking his head. You'll regret this, he muttered. I reached into my coat pocket, pulling out my phone. You might want to check your bank account, I said. His brow furrowed. What did you do? I didn't answer. Instead, I played the voicemail I had saved from him last night, the one where he lost his temper, where he threatened me. His face went pale. That's illegal, Mia, he snapped. You can't just... Actually, I can. I smiled sweetly, and I already did. His breathing was uneven now, his mind racing. You're going to pay for this, he hissed. I tilted my head. No, David, you are. I turned, heading toward the door. Behind me, I heard him inhale sharply. Mia. I stopped, glancing over my shoulder one last time. I'm done listening to you, David. Then I walked out, leaving him standing in the ruins of the life he had tried to trap me in. And for the first time in years, I was free. Epilogue. I drove away without looking back. By morning, David would wake up to a nightmare. His accounts frozen, his reputation unraveling, his perfect little world falling apart. And me, I would wake up to something new, something peaceful, something mine. David had always thought he was the one pulling the strings, but he had never realized that the whole time I was cutting them. The air in the apartment was thick with tension. David sat at the kitchen table, his fingers drumming against the wood, his jaw clenched tight. I stood across from him, arms crossed, waiting. So, that's it, he finally said, his voice low. You're really going through with this? I nodded. Yes. He let out a sharp breath, shaking his head. You're making a mistake, Mia. I smiled, tilting my head. No, David, I'm finally correcting one. His eyes darkened, and for a second, I could see the anger bubbling beneath his calm facade. David was never one to lose. He was used to controlling the situation, used to being the one calling the shots. But not this time. This time, I was the one holding all the cards, and he hated it. The game shifts, I had spent years catering to David's every whim, smiling when I was expected to, apologizing when I hadn't even done anything wrong, walking on eggshells just to avoid setting him off. I had spent so long being his shadow, his afterthought, his possession. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I had been planning this for months. While he had been too busy belittling me, while he had been too wrapped up in his arrogance, I had been working quietly in the background. Every financial document had been copied and stored. Every cruel text, every voicemail, every condescending email. Saved. My name had been removed from our joint accounts. A new place had been rented in my name alone. I was already gone. David just didn't know it yet. The outburst, David's hands clenched into fists. You think you're so clever, don't you? He said, his voice laced with bitterness. You think you've won. I let out a soft chuckle. Oh, David, I sighed. Winning isn't about beating you. Winning is about finally being free from you. His chair scraped loudly against the floor as he stood abruptly. Free from me? he scoffed, shaking his head. You don't even know how to live without me. I arched an eyebrow. That's funny, considering I've been doing everything on my own for years while you sat around pretending to be important. His face twisted with frustration. You ungrateful. I raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. Don't, I warned, my voice cold. Don't finish that sentence. For the first time, David hesitated. He was used to me shrinking, used to me backing down. But this was different. This time, I wasn't afraid. The final blow, I reached into my bag, pulling out a thick envelope. David frowned. What is that? Your reality check, I said, tossing it onto the table. He hesitated before picking it up. His fingers slid under the flap, pulling out the neatly stacked papers. The moment his eyes scanned the first page, his entire body stiffened. His gaze snapped to mine. You filed for divorce? Yes, I finished for him. Weeks ago, actually. His jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. You think you can just walk away? He asked, voice shaking with restrained fury. I don't think I can, I said. I know I can. Silence. The only sound in the apartment was the clock ticking on the wall. David's hands trembled slightly as he flipped through the documents, his mind racing. Then his lips curled into a sneer. You won't get a dime, he spat. I laughed, shaking my head. David, I don't want a dime. He blinked, thrown off by my response. I stepped forward, my voice calm and steady. I don't want your money. I don't want your name. I don't want anything to do with you. I let the words sink in. I just want you to disappear from my life. The consequences begin. David's confidence was slipping. He had spent years thinking he had control over me, that I was too scared to leave. But now he was the one who looked afraid. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the messages I had saved, the threats, the belittling remarks, the passive-aggressive demands. I turned the screen toward him. You know, I said casually, your boss might find these interesting. His face drained of color. You wouldn't, he whispered. I smiled. Try me. David had always prided himself on his reputation, the charming businessman, the well-spoken leader, the man everyone respected. But behind closed doors he was nothing more than a coward, and I was done protecting him. The breaking point. David's breathing was uneven now. You're ruining my life, he muttered. I sighed, shaking my head. No, David, I said. I'm just finally stepping out of the wreckage you created. He let out a bitter laugh, rubbing his face in frustration. You'll regret this, he muttered under his breath. I tilted my head. Will I? Because standing here, watching him struggle to process the fact that I was no longer under his thumb, it felt like freedom. It felt like peace. It felt like something I should have done a long time ago. The end of the road. David exhaled sharply, staring down at the divorce papers in his hands. This isn't over, he muttered, but we both knew it was. I turned toward the door, grabbing my bag. Before I stepped out, I glanced back one last time. You should check your accounts, I said over my shoulder. His brow furrowed. Why? I smirked. Because, David, I made sure that for once in your life, you'll have to stand on your own. I walked out without waiting for his reaction. But I already knew what I would hear. The sharp intake of breath, the panic setting in as he checked his bank statements, the realization that every single cent he thought he could use to manipulate me was gone. And I just kept walking, because for the first time in years, I was finally free. David had always been good at one thing, pretending. For years he wore the mask of a devoted husband, a respected businessman, the man everyone admired. But now the mask was slipping, and he was unraveling faster than I had anticipated. I had expected anger. I had prepared for retaliation. What I hadn't expected was just how quickly his world would start to crumble. The first signs of panic. The text messages started that night. David, we need to talk. This is getting ridiculous, Mia. Pick up the phone. David, you can't just walk away from everything we built. I ignored them all. Then the voicemails came. At first they were firm. Mia, you're making a mistake. Let's be adults about this. Then they turned desperate. Come on, baby, we can fix this. We can. Finally, the threats. If you think you can ruin my life and just walk away, you're wrong. You need me, Mia. You always have. I laughed at that one, because the truth was, I had never needed him. David needed me, and that was what terrified him the most. His reputation cracks. By the time the rumors started spreading, David had lost his grip entirely. His boss had heard about the video. The one where he humiliated me in public, tossing his drink in my face like I was nothing. The same one that had quietly made its way around his social circle. People were talking. And suddenly, the man who prided himself on being respected was the topic of hushed conversations and disapproving glances. David had built his entire career on perception. But perception was a fragile thing, and it was shattering right in front of him. The financial blow. David always assumed he was the one in control. The one who made the money, the one who dictated the rules. But what he never realized was that I had been planning my escape long before I ever walked out that door. When he finally checked his accounts, the panic set in. I had taken half, exactly what I was legally entitled to. But more importantly, I had removed myself from every financial obligation tied to him. The credit cards he had used to impress his friends, maxed out. The house payments he assumed I would cover, now solely his problem. The business accounts he thought he could dip into, locked. And suddenly, David had to do something he had never done before. Stand on his own. The confrontation. It was only a matter of time before he showed up. I had been expecting it. Still, when the loud banging rattled my apartment door, I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I opened it slowly, keeping the chain latch in place. David stood there, his once pristine suit wrinkled, his confidence replaced with something desperate. "We need to talk," he said. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "We already did." His hands clenched at his sides. "You can't do this to me, Mia." I arched an eyebrow. "Do what exactly?" "You know damn well what," he snapped. "You took everything. You ruined my job, my reputation, my finances." I let out a low chuckle. "I didn't ruin anything, David," I said. "You did that all on your own." His jaw tightened, and for a moment I could see the fight in him. But then, just as quickly, it faded. Because he knew the truth. And the truth was, he had already lost. The fall from grace. It wasn't long before David's world fully collapsed. His company had put him on suspension pending an internal review. The same colleagues who once looked up to him now avoided him. Friends stopped answering his calls. Even the new girlfriend, the one he had so proudly flaunted, suddenly wasn't so interested in a man with no money, no job, and no power. And just like that, the mighty David Carter was reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale. A whisper among colleagues. A lesson in what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. The attempt to rebuild. David wasn't the type to accept defeat. So, he did what he always did. He tried to rebuild, tried to pretend like nothing had changed. He applied for new jobs, but his reputation followed him. He reached out to old friends, but they had already moved on. He tried to reach me, but I was long gone. The last message he ever sent me was simple. "David, you really don't care anymore, do you?" I stared at it for a moment before typing back my final words to him. "Me? No, David. I don't." And that was the truth. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even celebrating his downfall. Because the best revenge wasn't watching him lose everything. The best revenge was knowing that I had finally won. And more importantly, I had finally moved on. The new beginning. I never looked back after that. The apartment I had once seen as temporary became my home. I decorated it with warm tones, soft lighting, and bookshelves filled with stories I actually loved. Not the ones David used to mock me for reading. I rebuilt my business, pouring my energy into something real. Something that was mine. And as the weeks turned into months, I realized something. I had spent so much time fearing the unknown. Fearing what life would be like without David. Fearing what it would mean to start over. But in reality, I had never been more free. One night, I stood by my window, sipping a glass of wine, looking out at the city lights. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Peace. Because while David was still trying to piece together his shattered world, I was already building something new. Something better. Something that belonged entirely to me. And that was worth everything. It had been 6 months since I last saw David. 6 months since he stood on my doorstep, begging for another chance. 6 months since I had looked him in the eye and told him with absolute certainty that I was done. And I meant it. Not in the way I had meant it all those times before. When I had packed my bags but never left. When I had rehearsed speeches in my head only to stay silent. When I had convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, he could change. This time was different. Because I had changed. Life without him. The first few weeks had been strange. Not because I missed him, but because I no longer had to walk on eggshells. No more waiting for his moods to shift like the tide. No more feeling like a supporting character in my own life. The silence in my apartment was no longer suffocating, it was peaceful. And with every passing day, I felt lighter. David's new reality. Through mutual friends, I heard bits and pieces about how David was doing. The answer? Not well. His attempt to rebuild had failed. He had bounced from one job interview to another, but no company wanted to risk hiring someone with his reputation. His financial situation had spiraled, and the luxurious lifestyle he had once flaunted was now nothing more than a memory. The girlfriend he had left me for? Gone. She had lasted all of 2 months before realizing that the man who once promised her the world couldn't even afford to take her to dinner. And just like that, David was alone. Closure. On my terms. One evening, I got a text from an unknown number. But I knew who it was. David, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but can we talk? Just once. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel the satisfaction of revenge. I just felt nothing. For the first time in my life, David Carter didn't hold an ounce of power over me. I debated ignoring it, blocking him, deleting the message without a second thought. But then I realized something. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about me, so I replied. Meet me at the Bay Cafe, 7 p.m., and just like that, I was in control. The final conversation. I arrived 10 minutes early. David was already there. He looked different, not the confident, arrogant man I had once known. Not the charming businessman with the perfect suit and perfect smile. He looked tired, defeated, smaller. He stood when he saw me, his lips parting as if he had a million things to say. But I held up a hand, stopping him. I'm not here to listen to excuses, David. He swallowed hard, nodding. I needed to see you. Why? I asked, genuinely curious. His gaze dropped to the table. Because I don't know who I am without you. I let out a slow breath, leaning back in my chair. David, that's the problem, I said softly. You never did. He flinched, but I wasn't done. You spent years making me feel small, convincing me that I was lucky to have you. But the truth is you were the lucky one, and you threw it all away. I know. His voice cracked. I know that now. I studied him, waiting for the anger, the resentment, the pain to return. But it didn't, because the person sitting across from me wasn't my problem anymore. I didn't come here to forgive you, I said. I came here to say goodbye. His eyes widened. Mia, please. I stood, grabbing my purse. You wanted to see me? I said. You have. Now you have to live with the fact that this is the last time. His mouth opened, then closed, and for once David Carter had nothing to say. A new beginning. That night, I walked away for the last time. Not with sadness, not with regret, but with an unshakable certainty that I had made the right choice. My life was no longer tied to his downfall, because my greatest revenge wasn't watching him fail. It was watching myself succeed. And I did. I expanded my business, signing a lease for a second location. I traveled, something I had always wanted to do but never could, because David always found a reason to keep me home. I surrounded myself with people who truly valued me. And most importantly, I found happiness. Not in another person. Not in proving anything to David, but in myself. Because while David Carter would spend the rest of his life looking back at what he lost, I would only ever look forward. And that was the real victory.